It is the winter of 1943. The shadow of war stretches across Europe, and on the battered coastline of southern England, desperation and ingenuity are about to meet in a way that will change the fate of millions. Day and night, returning RF squadrons limp through sheets of rain over dockyards that have been bombed to ruin. In the corridors of Whitehall, the war's planners stare at maps peppered with red circles, enemy airfields, submarine pens, the Atlantic Wall's fortress batteries, each one a problem that must be solved before Allied boots can break through. The challenge is both simple and terrifying. The Allies need to launch the greatest amphibious assault in history, but the Germans have mapped every real port, every dock, and every warehouse from Plymouth to Hull. Luftwaffe bombers scour the coast, and the cold eyes of U-boat captains peer through periscopes, searching for any sign of a coming invasion. Operation Overlord, the dream of opening a Western front, depends on assembling a vast armada and the supplies to sustain it. But where to gather those ships and men without drawing Nazi bombs directly onto them? The answer arrives in the form of pure audacity. Britain's most imaginative minds are summoned: master engineers, camouflage pioneers, the magicians of MI5, and the illusionists of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. The plan: build not just a new port, but an entire Phantom Harbor. A feat of deception so breathtaking that, if successful, it will draw German bombs and torpedoes onto empty water, leaving the real invasion force untouched. Colonel John Turner, architect of Britain's dummy airfields and inflatable Spitfire squadrons, stands at the center of this wild enterprise. He advocates building full-scale docks of scaffolding and timber, fake fuel tanks made from stitched canvas, and ships whose hulls are nothing but painted wood and clever geometry. The technical demands multiply by the day. Carpenters hammer together wooden piers, each plank camouflaged to mimic the weathering of decades at sea. Film studio set designers paint hull numbers and rust streaks onto plywood freighters, which are anchored in shallow pools behind the dunes. Road crews lay rails that run nowhere, and stagehands fill crate after crate marked ammunition with nothing but sand. To simulate ceaseless activity, smoke machines burn flask, coal, and tar, rising in thick columns morning and night, fooling the enemy's cameras with the promise of unending labor. Meanwhile, a phalanx of wireless operators sends encrypted port signals into the ether, daily shipping schedules, routine dock chatter, false manifests, creating a tapestry of radio traffic that convinces German intelligence that a colossal armada gathers at Dover. Double agents, cogs within the legendary double-cross system, drip-feed reports to Berlin, describing convoys massing at Southend and Portsmouth, not knowing that the only ships in view are cleverly anchored scaffolding props, watched over by sheepish signalers as German reconnaissance aircraft circle overhead. Each deception must survive the scrutiny of the Abwehr and the aerial cameras of the Luftwaffe. From 20,000 feet, inflatable landing craft and dummy tanks are scattered artfully among the dunes. Lanterns flicker in preset patterns to suggest fueling late into the night, while even the bomb craters left from previous Luftwaffe raids are hastily filled, then perfectly recreated with blackened timber to give the impression of rapid repairs. Local laborers trade jokes with actors in naval uniforms, each understanding that for every bomb dropped on these docks, a real ship or soldier somewhere else is spared. Yet the Germans, obsessed with the threat to Pas-de-Calais, pepper the coast with bombs. U-boats mark priority sectors, firing torpedoes into anchorage grids, expecting destruction but finding only the scattered debris of dummy ships drifting listlessly in the tide. The fake port becomes a living chessboard, every move calculated to both engage and mislead. Bombs thunder in empty water, while the real transports, hidden in tidal estuaries and camouflaged under corrugated steel, inch closer to their targets. Thus begins the greatest deception campaign of the war, a spectacle of ingenuity born of necessity and executed with the discipline of theater and war. It is not simply a fake port. It is an entire infrastructure, a living narrative built from timber, canvas, and the unbreakable will to defy the gaze of an enemy convinced that victory is only a matter of perfect intelligence. The story now unfolds, how Britain made the illusion so real that German U-boats bombed nothing but empty water, and in doing so, set the stage for the liberation of a continent tour. At dawn, Fog blanketed the southern shingle as Royal Engineers convened for a briefing that might have been written by a playwright. Their orders: build a city in 12 weeks, knowing it would never serve a single ship. Rail yards, dockyards, warehouses, oil tanks, all crafted to the standards of a film set, their plywood walls painted with streaks of rust and cannily positioned to precisely match their real counterparts. Teams from Shepperton Studios worked around the clock beside bomb-displaced carpenters, assembling ships from timber frames lashed with bolts and painted cloth hulls studded with simulated rivets. Each one had to fool camera lenses, not seafarers, so even the placement of anchors and scuffed decks was calculated by specialists in scenic design. The complexity of the ruse demanded relentless coordination. Coded telegraph messages pulsed out from tunnels beneath Dover Castle, simulating the logistical pulse of a real port: ship arrival times, unloading orders, fake chest-thumping communiques. To reinforce the illusion, restricted zones were declared, fences thrown up, and home guard units stationed along routes. At night, blackout protocols were loosely enforced, while lamps illuminated staged cargo operations that never ended, flickering across the water for Luftwaffe crews to document in their flight logs. Even local police played their part, redirecting traffic and enforcing secrecy as rumors swirled about mysterious special shipments. A key innovation was in the deployment of dummy landing craft. Thousands of wooden and rubber vessels, their hulls glinting under painted numbers and flags, lay anchored in inlets and harbors from Dover to the Isle of Wight. The dummy fleet was supported by scaffolding breakwaters and artificial mooring posts, so from high above, a bomber's camera would record bustling activity. To add authenticity, jeeps dragged chains around rubber-tracked tank decoys, their marks simulating real vehicle movement, and actors donned fatigues, miming maintenance in sections specially marked for reconnaissance. The threat of German U-boats made every detail a matter of life and death. Allied minefields and coastal batteries formed a real line of defense, but the Phantom port was tasked with draining Axis resources. When U-boats plotted anchor grids using intercepted radio signals and sighted what they thought was a dense gathering of high-priority targets, torpedoes burst through the waves, detonating against empty hulls or drifting rafts. Many German logs recorded major convoy destroyed after monitoring smoke signals and staged detritus floating for hours, while in reality, the real supply fleets edged through separate, camouflaged estuaries, guided by secrecy and layered decoy signals. The deception depended on the double-cross system. British intelligence fed select agent scripts describing troop assembly zones, fuel dump operations, and times for convoy departures. The Germans plotted their attacks accordingly, and using photographic interpretation, believed they had calculated the perfect moment to strike a vital Allied harbor. Under cover of darkness, fake port workers swept bomb craters clean, then reconstructed them in the morning using blackened timber soaked in kerosene to resemble fresh destruction. The effect, documented by Axis spies and confirmed by decoded radio intercepts, was a reinforcement of the illusion that British logistics could repair a bombed port overnight, making it appear nearly invincible. To keep up appearances, even the stock markets in Stockholm were manipulated. Rumors of shipping insurance claims and supply contracts for Dover and Portsmouth sent Norwegian stocks climbing, yet it was all a mirage as the real buildup took place elsewhere. On the ground, laborers swapped tales of their invisible battlefield, working alongside set builders who swapped out destroyed breakwaters for new ones overnight. The real docks, Plymouth, Southampton, were shielded by camouflage nets, smoke screens, and marshaled troop secrecy, while the Phantom harbor drank the brunt of the U-boat war. Meanwhile, on remote listening posts, RAF wire operators monitored German radio chatter. Reports flooded in. Enemy presents major threat at Dover. Bombers will prioritize dock facilities. Allied command smiled grimly, knowing that each bomb dropped on empty water meant one less for the true invasion armada assembling under tarpaulins and corrugated roofs out of reach of German eyes. As the clock ticked towards D-Day, the intensity of German attacks on the fake port crescendoed. More sorties, more torpedoes, more fuel spent. U-boat wolfpacks logged tonnage sunk and victories won that had little bearing on reality. The cost to the Axis was immense. Wasted munitions, depleted resources, personnel losses in heavily defended but ultimately irrelevant waters. In the final days before the real landings, the deception reached its zenith. Massive dummy convoys, staged bomb damage, orchestrated radio traffic, and phony Admiralty communiques overtook the southern coast, engineering a mirage so thorough it convinced not only the Abwehr, but the highest levels of German command that Pas-de-Calais was the true target. The legend of Britain's fake port was now more than timber and paint. It was a mosaic of technological adaptation, human ingenuity, and relentless psychological warfare, played out hour by hour against the most formidable spy cameras and submarine crews of the conflict. June 5th, 1944. Allied command centers hum with a tension that radiates to every harbor, every roadside barricade, every stretch of empty water on the Channel coast. In the hours before the greatest amphibious assault in history, the ruse of Britain's fake port reaches its masterstroke. The final acts of deception, codenamed Glimmer, Taxable, and Big Drum, launch at dawn, each designed to paint enemy radar screens with phantom fleets, roaring toward beaches miles from the true target. In Dover and Folkestone, the staged chaos is almost theatrical. Columns of trucks move in endless convoys, landing craft ghost silently along the shallows, and signal lamps flash code to non-existent ships just over the horizon. On the water, German U-boat captains squint through periscopes, their logbooks heavy with the coordinates of prime invasion anchorages drawn from weeks of radio intercepts and recon flights. As Operation Fortitude's final curtain rises, wolfpacks strike hard at empty convoys and shadowy silhouettes, torpedoes bursting against empty timber hulls and artfully planted debris. Above, Luftwaffe bombers wheel and dive, pummeling the ports below with hundreds of tons of explosives. Each strike is a triumph of deception, bombs and torpedoes wasted on water and scaffolding, every explosion a silent testament to Allied ingenuity. The real invasion force is already on the move, shielded by fog, camouflage nets, and layers of misdirection, slipping across narrow channels into the maw of Normandy. In Berlin, panic and confusion reign. Intelligence from multiple sources, agents, intercepted messages, reconnaissance photos, all confirm what German high command has feared for months. The mighty Allied invasion will thunder across the Pas-de-Calais. 22 Panzer divisions stand ready, their guns aimed at empty beaches and fictitious ports, blind to the true drama that unfolds far to the southwest. For days, the Germans cling to the illusion, believing the real attack is yet to come. Even as Eisenhower's men drive deep into France, securing a foothold bought not just with blood and steel, but with subterfuge and paint. With the beaches secured and the mulberry harbors pieced together in Normandy, the fake ports of southern England fall silent. The actors drift away, the lights go dark on Britain's greatest stage set. The wooden hulls rot in tidal pools, their painted numbers now weathered and faint. The scaffolding and breakwaters, battered by bombs and salt, are salvaged or left to dissolve into shingle. But the effect is undeniable. Casualty reports from Dover and Folkestone, once expected to be a charnel house, reveal far less destruction than predicted. The phantom ports, designed to be a target, have saved thousands of lives by redirecting the Axis's fury into empty air and water. After the guns fall silent and the continent is liberated, the scale of the deception becomes public. MI5's archives reveal a narrative almost too outlandish for belief, a collaboration of engineers, radio wizards, playwrights, and seabees creating entire armies and fleets from wood, fabric, and imagination. The double-cross agents who fed Berlin with carefully curated truths are quietly celebrated, their real identities shielded even decades later. Post-war historians, sifting through the wreckage of fake docks and dummy warships, marvel at a moment where camouflage and creative thinking turned the tide of war. For the men and women who engineered this illusion, their memories are laced with pride and disbelief. "We built a port that never existed," wrote one Shepperton carpenter, and watched as the Germans bombed empty water because of it. Veterans in pubs along the coast, dockers, set builders, railwaymen, share stories of nights spent painting silent hulls, swapping uniforms, and tuning radios to play the part of a port brigade. For many, it was the closest they'd come to the front lines, and yet, their quiet courage redrawn the boundaries of warfare. The legacy endures. The lessons of the fake port ripple out into post-war emergency architecture, humanitarian logistics, even Cold War intelligence operations. In museums and war colleges, the story of how Britain tricked U-boats and bombers with an empty city is now accepted as a masterpiece of psychological warfare, a powerful reminder that victory often comes not just from brute force, but from cunning, creativity, and the courage to dream bigger than your enemy can imagine. It stands, finally, as both a warning and an inspiration. As new generations contend with the dilemmas of war and peace, they inherit not just the concrete from D-Day beaches or the steel of Mulberry harbors, but the almost invisible imprint of the war's boldest illusion, the port that never was, and the water that bore only echoes of battle. In the theater of World War II, Britain's fake port played to its greatest audience, the eyes of the enemy, wholly convinced by a spectacle made of nothing but ingenuity, audacity, and the shimmering promise of hope.